Hey there, horror fans. Today's episode of Slow Sips and Deep Cuts features the movie Hokum. Hokum is from 2026. It's directed by Damien McCarthy, and it is his third larger scale production. I'm a huge fan of Damien McCarthy's other films. I would say that Oddity was my favourite up until this point. And the first thing I would say is that although it feels very much an expansion of Damien McCarthy's universe and collection of horror works, each of his films has felt very fresh and unique, and Hokum to me is certainly no different. So in terms of the plot of this movie, Hokum follows an author called Ohm. He is returning to a hotel in Ireland with the intent to scatter his parents' ashes. And his parents honeymooned at this particular hotel, so it holds a lot of emotional significance. At the same time, he's also trying to finish the last stage of his book, which he's really struggling with. So very quickly after arriving back at the hotel, Ohm is regaled by stories by staff at the hotel regarding a witch that is said to haunt the honeymoon suite his parents went to for their honeymoon. So it's set up in a typical Damien McCarthy way. We are dealing with a spooky, scary, creepy, but in a very real life, real world setting. There is a human plot going on as well. And we meet several characters fairly early on in the film. We meet a bellboy, and eagle-eyed viewers will see that there is Bell and Bellboy, and that takes us back to Oddity, which was a very cool little tie-in. A bit like when I saw Oddity and you see the little cabinet and you've got the rabbit in the background. That theme, those little tie-ins, those little hooks really do make it feel like a Damien McCarthy film. And the interactions between Ohm and the bellboy really don't do much to warm us up to the main character. So usually there's some level of, rooting for a particular character because they genuinely seem quite nice. But the way that McCarthy has presented and written the central character in this, do you know what? He's not actually that nice. He's actually pretty horrible to the bellboy. And he's got a kind of real dry, wry cynicism and wit with how he deals with the characters in the early part of the film. We also meet several other characters. We meet a fantastic character called Jerry, who is played by Dave Wilmot, and the performance in this movie as Jerry is absolutely fantastic. We also meet Fiona, who works at the hotel, and several other people, including the hotel manager and owner, and lots of other people. And, as they're telling Ohm about all the myth and the mythology around the witch, these guys really, really believe it. He is very sceptical about all of this, of course, and that's very clear. But he's sort of thrust into this kind of like folk mystery by default, really, by being there. Anyway, so events turn, and as we know, it's quite upsetting. We learn that Ohm is actually struggling so much with himself. He actually attempts to take his own life in the hotel, and it is only thanks to the actions of Fiona, who is working in the bar and who they have quite a nice little interaction, a nice relationship with. She feels like something's off. She goes, something is off, and ultimately her intervention saves his life. And I think from that point, you tend to look at the central character a little bit more sympathetically. There's a lot more depth going on. Anyway, so as he is recovering in the hospital, he actually rehabilitates and returns to the hotel to collect his belongings. And it is during that return visit that he understands and he's informed that Fiona has gone missing. And out of gratitude and I feel a general warmth and caring for Fiona, plus a little goading from Jerry, a little encouragement from Jerry, he decides to try and find out what's happened to Fiona. Jerry believes that this has everything to do with the witch and the honeymoon suite and is making an attempt to go and investigate. And Ohm gets kind of dragged into this, although I think his interest starts to increase and he genuinely wants to help and figure out what's happened to Fiona. So this unlikely pair of allies, go to explore the hotel. Unfortunately, Jerry is whisked off by another character who is convinced that he is behind Fiona's disappearance. And Ohm ends up alone in the hotel and in the honeymoon suite. And I think once he is in the honeymoon suite, This movie really takes it up a gear, and McCarthy is able to unleash his scares, and he is masterful at this. The cinematography and the way this movie are filmed genuinely terrified me. There are faces coming out of the dark, there is great camera work, there are focuses on inanimate objects that are creepy as hell. And we do ultimately learn what happens to Fiona and what her fate was. And the reveal, how that is revealed, that was very chilling. I found that really uncomfortable to watch. I think that there was so much atmosphere and so much fear at this point that you are feeling like this movie is closing in on you, and it genuinely feels claustrophobic and so scary. And I would say that it is really sad because of all the characters in this film. I would say Fiona is an extremely likeable character, and you are genuinely saddened when you learn what's happened to her and why that's happened to her. And when I keep talking about a very human story and a very raw, human, emotional story, I'm talking about how wonderful it is that Damien McCarthy manages to weave such an intense, real human mystery in with a supernatural horror. Because once we learn what's happened to Fiona, we are then given the reveal of what is going on in the honeymoon suite and the witch of the hotel. The way this is filmed and presented, top tier. Really good. You see enough, you don't see too much. You see enough to know what's going on, and you see enough to be really creeped out by it. Well, I certainly did anyway. And there is this mirroring of the story that behind this horrible event that's happened is a very human big bad. But there is also the big bad of the spiritual and supernatural sense in this movie, and the two work alongside each other really well. So as the film is entering its kind of final stages, you see our main character doing battle with both the human big bad and the supernatural big bad. So very similarly to Oddity, where you have got a human big bad, you're also dealing with a horror, supernatural big bad. So it's very similar in Hokum, but it is a formula that works for me really well. And there were lots of aspects in this film that shocked me. You know, we are losing characters that I didn't think we would lose. And I like the way that this film is constantly playing with the idea of whether or not we're going to get a happy ending. And I think that's mirrored really nicely with the text and the book that the main character is writing. You know, if you recall at the beginning of the movie, Ohm is looking at writing a really horrible ending to his story. In fact, Fiona draws on it. She's like, I'm not going to read it. That's depressing as hell. Why am I going to read that awful ending, you know? And you're thinking, Christ, this is heading towards a really unhappy, tragic ending, you know? And like I said at the top, there are spoilers, so I am going to go into this. But in the end, we know that we do get a happy ending. And whilst I can kind of see that that might grate with some people, certainly because of how previous films have ended, it's kind of very neatly tied up, this movie, which I'm actually okay with. You know, I'm quite happy with the happy ending, especially like in this story. But I can understand why it might frustrate some people that it is nicely tied up. However, I think that this is a homage and a way of honouring Fiona, who, you know, really wanted this novel to end well. She didn't get the ending that she deserved in her story, so I think Damien McCarthy wrote a pleasant end to this to help with that. And I think in doing so, it justifies a lot of the humour, because let's not forget, we are dealing with somebody that's attempted to take their own life. We are dealing with somebody that is mourning their parents. We are dealing with an extremely tragic part of Ohm's history that is also explored, another layer of tragedy. You know, we learn that, certainly at the end, we learn that Ohm's mother was killed by him in an accident, you know, and that guilt and that fear and this being scared and being a kid, he's held that with him all this time, and it certainly goes to explain why he behaves in certain ways, and you don't learn that until the end. So, you know, without the humour and the tied up happy ending, I think that this would have been extremely bleak. There are big themes at play here. You know, we are looking at a child accidentally killing their mum. We are looking at somebody attempting to take their own life. You know, without these like human, like happy ending conditions, I think it would have been a very different movie. So all in all, I think Hokum is a fantastic movie. I think for me, it's actually the favourite of the three larger productions by Damien McCarthy. Yeah. Have you seen Hokum? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you like about it? Let's talk about it.